EGON von Greyerz, don't be fooled by the summer doldrums in gold. EGON says to follow the money, which is dumping U.S. treasuries and buying gold. Here's the details. By EGON von Greyerz of Gold, Switzerland. Whilst the US government worries about the military threat of Russia, and the trade deficit with China, they show no concern for the real problems. To understand what is really happening, all we need to do is to follow the money. The flows of real money reveal where global economic power is moving. The US has not had a real budget surplus for almost 60 years and has run balance of payment deficits every year since 1975. A country that lives above its means for over half a century is technically and economically bankrupt. Its debt should have zero value and so should its currency. But the US has skillfully avoided bankruptcy so far by having the reserve currency of the world and being the biggest military power. The world's most indebted country. Both Russia and China can see the writing on the wall. They understand that the world's most indebted country cannot solve its debt problem by issuing more debt. That is why Russia, China together with India are buying most of the global gold production every year. In May 2018, Russia added another 600,000 ounces or almost 20 tons to its gold reserves. Since January 2018, when Trump became president, U.S. debt has increased by 6% or $1.1 trillion to $21.1 trillion, whilst Russia has added another 9 million ounces of gold and are now holding $80 billion of gold reserves. The world will no longer finance U.S. excesses. So whilst the US economy is taking the road to perdition, Russia knows that the only money that will survive is gold. Just like it always has. The world has for years financed US debt by buying US treasuries. But we are now seeing a marked change. Many countries are currently liquidating US debt paper. They know what will happen to US debt and are trying to get rid of their holdings in an orderly manner to avoid treasuries crashing together with the dollar. This is what will happen at some point in the next 1 to 3 years. Global investors will panic out of dollar-denominated bonds, leading to a crash of both the US currency and dollar debt. The Chinese know this, but their US Treasury holdings are so large that they need to go slowly in order not to shoot themselves in the foot. In the end, China is likely to take a major loss on its dollar Treasury holdings, but that is the price they have been willing to pay in order to build up its economy and manufacturing sector by financing US deficit spending. Simultaneously, China has invested heavily in the resource sector in most parts of the world. China understands that commodities are massively undervalued compared to the bubble asset markets. At the same time, China has continued to buy a major percentage of annual gold mine production since 2008, taking total Chinese purchases to 16,000 tons. Sell US treasuries, buy gold. For anyone who wants to follow the money, just look at the chart below how Russia is dumping US treasuries and adding to its gold reserves every month. Because Russia knows that gold will surge and US treasuries crash. From insignificant gold holdings in 2007, Russia today has $80 billion of gold. And since 2010, Russia's US Treasury holdings have gone down by 89% to $20 billion today. And just look at China and India. Their gold purchases in the last 10 years amount to 25,000 tons. This is virtually the total global gold mine production during that period. These countries understand what will happen to the financial system and to most currencies. So again, follow the money. Double whammy for Treasury investors. Many investors are holding US treasuries as a flight to safety. Well, I certainly agree with the Russians and the Chinese. Treasuries must be one of the riskiest investments you can hold today and is as far from wealth preservation as you can ever get. The dollar will go to zero. It is already down 98% since 1913, and treasuries will go to zero as the world realizes that US debt can never be repaid with real money. So investors in US treasuries can expect the most momentous double whammy. Whatever they don't lose on the dollar going to zero, they will definitively lose on US debt instruments. This means that just in US Treasury debt, over $21 trillion, and growing, will explode, or more accurately implode. History's only surviving currency. What is the best currency to hold your assets in? This is a question I often get asked. The answer is really so easy, but still most people never see the obvious. If something has declined by 97% or more, is it going to stop there? Not likely. All currencies have lost 97 to 99% in the last 100 years, so it is extremely likely that they will lose the remaining 1 to 3%. Therefore, why try to pick the best of a useless lot when they will all lose all their value? There is only one currency that stands the test of time, which is gold, of course. It is the only money that has survived in history. With a 5,000-year success rate, why bet against gold? Gold is the only money to hold from now on until the financial system has been reset or has imploded. One thing is certain, there will be no orderly reset. No central bank or government hocus pocus can ever make $2 quadrillion of debt and liabilities, 25x global GDP, disappear by waving a magic wand. Gold is money and gold is instant liquidity. And if for a while there is no paper money to exchange it against, gold can always be used for barter, just as it has throughout history. By holding cash in a bank in whatever currency, it will either become worthless due to endless money printing, or the banks will lose it all in their futile attempts to repay all depositors their money, which has been lent out 10 to 20 times. Most banks have fraudulently accepted depositors' money, knowing that they would never be able to repay it. This crazy Ponzi scheme works as long as the world believes that printed money is real money. But when the music stops, everyone will realize that it wasn't money at all, but pieces of paper or electronic entries that everybody called money. At that point, fiat money will have zero value, and few people will understand that dollar, euros, yen, etc. in the 100 of trillions can just go up in smoke without any trace. Much better to hold an asset like gold, which is no one else's liability and which has zero counterparty risk, as long as it is held in physical form and outside the banking system. Don't be fooled by the summer doldrums in gold. After the manipulators dumped 30% of annual gold mine production in a few hours last week, demand has been slow. So with the price pushed down over $30, at the beginning of summer trading, we might now enter a quiet gold market until late August or early September. This is quite a normal seasonal pattern. Low demand for gold and high stock markets leave no room for complacency. The risks in the world economy and the financial system are so major that any minor catalyst can burst the biggest bubble in history in a millisecond. Current prices of gold and silver represent an excellent opportunity to move investments out of all the overvalued bubble markets and out of risky fiat money into the best insurance and investment that paper money can buy today. This is a historical opportunity to move wealth out of an extremely fragile house of cards to the most solid wealth protection asset that paper money can buy. EGON von Greyerz, gold is good and greed is no good. Don't believe that the dollar in any way should be proud over its outperformance against the bolivar and peso. Since 1999 the dollar is, by EGON von Greyerz of Gold Switzerland. It can't happen here. What is happening in Venezuela and Argentina cannot occur in Western economies. That's at least what markets believe, with stocks and most bubble assets remaining in cloud cuckoo land. Rates in Argentina have just gone to 40% to protect the currency. Anyone who believes that rates in the US will remain at current low levels or that German and Japanese rates will remain negative has a massive shock coming. Hyperinflation, a currency event. Argentina used to be a very strong economy 100 years ago, but in the last few decades the country has gone through several economic collapses and hyperinflation. Argentina just increased short-term rates to 40% to defend the currency. The peso has declined 95% since 2001 and is on its way to zero. So it is quickly catching up with another South American country, Venezuela. The official bolivar is down 99.7% against the dollar since 1995. The black market rate is much worse. Dollar collapse. Don't believe that the dollar in any way should be proud over its outperformance against the bolivar and peso. Since 1999 the dollar is down 80% against real money, which is gold, of course. The Venezuelans and Argentinians would have done very well since the late 1990s to hold dollars rather than their own currency. But if they, as well as the Americans, had held their savings in real money gold, they would today live like kings in their home country. Very few understand history and economics. I am amazed how few people understand the importance of history and economics. I meet many family offices whose main objective should be to preserve generational wealth. Very few of them hold gold or understand the importance of gold for wealth preservation purposes. They don't understand what is happening in Argentina and Venezuela will also happen in many Western countries. I also meet people with less wealth and most think that having gold is ridiculous and serves no purpose. You can't eat gold is a very common remark. They don't realize that people in Venezuela can't eat the bolivar either, but if they owned gold, they would be able to buy food or whatever else they needed. In my article last week I showed the charts of gold in pesos and bolivars. Gold is such a simple method to preserve wealth, but it is a secret that virtually nobody knows or understands. In every period of economic depression, hyperinflation, or political oppression, like the Asians in Uganda in the 1970s, gold has always been the savior of the people who own it. Since Nixon took the disastrous decision to decouple the world's monetary system from gold, we have seen a free-for-all money printing bonanza that has destroyed the value of all currencies and created massive credit and asset bubbles around the world. Investors and money managers have been under the illusion that it was their skill that has generated this enormous wealth. Few have understood that central bankers have created the global Ponzi scheme of all time, which has put a giant rocket under most assets and driven them to the stratosphere. And even fewer people understand that this rocket will fall down to Earth without all the bubbles, which will evaporate in space. As this happens, the West will do exactly what Venezuela and Argentina are doing today. They will print unlimited amounts of money and create debt on an exponential scale. The central banks are most probably aware that they can't solve a debt problem by creating more debt. But they will be totally clueless what else to do. They will at that point lose control of interest rates. The market will take over, as it should do, and rates will rise dramatically. Greed again causes big losses in Argentine bonds. Manipulation always ends in tears. The long end of the market will dump bonds, driving rates to the teens and probably much higher. This is what is happening in Argentina right now with short-term rates at 40%. Last year they issued a 100-year dollar bond of $2.75 billion at a yield of 7.9%. The bond was 3.5x oversubscribed. How can anyone of a sound mind buy a 100-year bond issued by a country that time and time again has defaulted on its debt and devalued its currency? We all know why they did it: greed, of course. At the time US 30-year rates were sub 3%, so an 8% return seemed very attractive. The 100-year bond has crashed 20% since January this year. It will come down a lot more. Greed caused defaults in the 1970s. I remember the same kind of greed in the 1970s. Swiss rates were then around 2% and UK rates were 15%. Many UK companies borrowed in Swiss francs. The only problem was that from 1972 to 1978 the pound against the Swiss franc fell from 10 to 3, a 70% fall. This meant that someone borrowing 1 million Swiss francs, which was £100,000 in 1972, owed £333,000 in 1978. So saving a few percentage points on interest was not very clever when the debt went up 3.3x. I know many borrowers who went under due to this unsound currency mismatch. People never learn. High rates means high risk. There is a reason why Argentina paid 8% when US rates were 3%. Argentina has an appalling record of economic management and is not a sound borrower. And Swiss rates were low because the economic policies of the country were extremely sound, whilst the UK had massive economic problems which led to economic collapse, inflation, and a crashing currency. The US living on borrowed time and money. The US is now an extremely badly managed economy that has lived above its means for 60 years. The chart below shows US deficits since 1968. The surplus Clinton years were not real. They were fake figures, as US debt increased every year that a surplus was shown. In fact, US debt has gone up every year, without exception, since 1957. As the chart shows, the deficits are expected to continue at a high level for years to come. In my view, that forecast is much too optimistic. So there we have it. The strongest economy in the world has for 60 years lived on borrowed and printed money. Hard to call that a strong economy. This has all been possible due to the petrodollar and the US military might. But that is now coming to an end. The dollar is backed by nothing but debt, and it will soon accelerate its fall to zero, just like the bolivar and peso. And according to independent experts, the Russian and Chinese military power and sophistication is far superior to that of the US. South American contagion will go global in the next few years. The South American contagion is going to spread rapidly to the US and also to Europe, Japan, China, and many more countries. The fake money and mega debt party is over. The world will soon suffer the consequences of the sybaritic times that the US and the West have created. And those consequences will be of a magnitude that few can realize today. Follow the wisdom of the East. China does know what is going to happen. That is why the Chinese are continuing to accumulate gold in enormous quantities. They added another 212 tons last month and have bought almost 16,000 tons of gold since 2008, which is the majority of the world mine production. So it is now time to batten down the hatches and take all the protection that we can. The Argentinians and Venezuelans would have avoided misery by holding gold instead of paper money. It is now too late for them, as they have little money left. But there is time for Americans, Europeans, and other nations to protect themselves today by owning physical gold and silver. Anyone who doesn't heed this warning is certain to regret it in coming years. Just follow the wisdom of the East, who understand the importance of gold and history, as the chart above shows.